Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Atypical Security Guard coming to you today with a little bit of information. If you've been following my channel and you're a part of our community tab, over the last couple of weeks, I've been posing a question of the day. And in these questions of the day, I'm asking you guys, what would be your response to certain situations? You know, situations of use of force, situations of maybe random violence on the property that you're working. And then one of the questions that I asked the other day had to do with detainment, and more specifically, detainment of people who have been either accused or pointed out as potentially shoplifting. If you're working in retail establishments like I do, specifically, say, a grocery store or a shopping mall or one of the big box retailers, it's not uncommon for multiple people who are working within that facility. These would be associates or managers or just average customers that might point to someone and say, hey, that person over there is stealing, or hey, stop that guy, he's stealing. And so in some of the answers to the questions that I've gotten, there seems to be kind of a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge about what you have to have in order to make a stop or a detainment. And guys, there's a lot of different opinions on these when I put these posts up, but it's important for you to know that this is not something that's negotiable. I mean, we're talking about, you know, potentially you running afoul of the law. If not just violating your policy or your post orders, you could actually end up in serious trouble. So I want to go over kind of the different levels of authority to detain. And we're going to be talking about specifically the authority for a police officer to detain, a security guard to make a detainment for shoplifting, and then also for loss prevention. These are the three areas that are most applicable to what I'm doing, so I feel like I'm able to speak on that. Before we go any further, I am not an attorney. This is not legal advice. This is my opinion based on my experience, based on my levels of authority as a trainer. But again, just my opinion. This is not legal advice. Consult an attorney if you have any questions, but I do want to kind of go over this. So again, we're going to be talking about this in the understanding of a retail setting. Again, grocery store, shopping mall, large box retailer. And we're going to go over the three levels. This will be police, security, loss prevention. I'm going to give you guys a scenario, and then we're going to go over the levels of authority and how that applies to each. So the scenario is going to be that you're working inside of a retail establishment. Let's just say a Walmart, right? Because Walmart has a jewelry store. So if you can, just picture a Walmart that has a jewelry store, and in that jewelry store, you've got an associate that's working. It's got the big open front so that if you're, you know, kind of walking in the walkway of that Walmart, you're able to kind of move in and out of that jewelry store. Some of the jewelry settings in a Walmart are just kind of like a really open area. It's not enclosed, and some may be enclosed, but just think of having a jewelry area that's approximately, let's just say 30 feet away from one register. So at this register, you have a police officer, you have a security guard, and you have a loss prevention officer. All three people know each other. They're all in the store. They're having a conversation. 30 feet away, okay, 30 feet away from this register, that is the entrance of the jewelry store, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go with the police first, right? So in this jewelry store, the three people, the loss prevention officer, the security guard, and the police officer, they hear the associate scream, "Help! Help! No! Don't do it! Don't take that! No! Ah!" Right? And then out of the jewelry store runs a guy in a red sweatshirt, okay? Now, the police officer gets to operate under reasonable suspicion. What is reasonable suspicion? He has to be able to articulate why he is going to go up to this person and stop this person to make a detainment, right? Now, under reasonable suspicion, he doesn't have the authority at that point to, you know, search this person or arrest this person. But if he were to run down the hallway and catch up to this person who's wearing this red sweatshirt that ran out of the store, he can reasonably articulate that based on the fact that he heard screams from the associate, that the associate said, no, stop, that the associate said, don't take that, right? He can reasonably go up to this person, stop this person, and say, hey, what are you doing? Now, let's just assume that when he stops this person, the person has a diamond ring in a box. He also has a cut on his left hand, and there's glass all over his shirt, right? Now he has probable cause to actually detain this person, search this person, and potentially arrest this person, okay? Now, there is a different set of circumstances for the security guard. The security guard who was at this same location. We're gonna rewind it. We're gonna Quentin Tarantino this thing. We're gonna rewind it. So now the security guard, the police officer, the loss prevention agent, they hear the same thing, right? No, stop, don't take that. Ah! Glass breaks, right? Guy runs out wearing the red sweatshirt. Now the security guard can only operate under probable cause. So since the security guard is not located directly in the plain view of what is happening inside of that jewelry store, that security guard cannot make that detainment. Even though he might assume that that person running out just committed a crime. He might have reasonable suspicion that that person just committed a crime. The security guard is not certified under the state and is not sworn under the state. That security guard cannot make that stop and cannot make that detention. Now, if you were to move that security guard from the register 30 feet all the way down to the entrance of the jewelry section, that security guard is standing within that jewelry section. He's looking straight at the associate, and the person in the red sweatshirt walks in, breaks the glass counter, reaches in, grabs the diamond, argues with the person, takes it, starts running. That officer now has probable cause from plain view of seeing a crime that is just committed in front of him. But I want you to keep that in mind with a little asterisk, because we're going to get to that a little bit later. Now, let's stop. Let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to the register. And now it's going to be the loss prevention officer's turn, right? So same thing. No, stop, don't, crash, don't take that. Ah! And then the person starts to run out of the jewelry store. The loss prevention officer, who is a security guard, just like the armed security guard, he also has to operate under probable cause. He cannot operate under reasonable suspicion because, again, he is not there directly in front to see everything happen, and he cannot respond and detain that person for potentially stealing or shoplifting or robbing that jewelry clerk, okay? Now, the security guard and the loss prevention officer can respond to the disturbance. Now, this is a little bit different. I don't want to go down that road, but the security guard, the loss prevention officer can respond to the disturbance, and they can deal with whatever happens or whatever they see when they get there in that situation. But we're talking about specifically the act of someone taking something and being seen or not being seen, okay? Now, all of this has to be understood while also keeping in mind certain multipliers, okay? Now, for the police officer, again, strictly gets to operate under reasonable suspicion. Once he detains that person and he sees certain indicators that this person was indeed involved in a crime, he can now operate under probable cause. But for a security guard to operate under probable cause, one of the multipliers that a lot of security guards will find themselves having to deal with is the post orders. Your post orders might specifically preclude you from getting involved. So let's go all the way back to the very beginning of our scenario. Let's say that that security guard is not 30 feet away at a register. He's actually right there in plain view and sees everything that's happening. If your post orders specifically say that you are only to observe and report, you cannot intervene. If you choose to, and this goes to some of our other posts that we've had up this week, because of moral obligation, because it's the right thing to do, then you are taking on all of the liability of what you do in terms of your interaction with that subject, anything that might happen in cross-directional action between you and that subject that might involve the associate, any property damage, all of that. You are taking on all of that responsibility because your post orders are a specific agreement between your company and the contractor. This has all been worked out by an attorney, and it's a laid out agreement as to what you are supposed to do while you're working. If you choose to violate that, you are taking on all that responsibility. The multiplier for security that we will most likely interact with is going to be the post orders that preclude you from doing anything, because most of these retailers, most of these grocery stores, most of your malls, they simply want you to observe and report. I get it. It's frustrating, I know, but this is the difference between being a security guard and being a police officer. You have no duty to act, and most oftentimes the multiplier is going to be that you are not to act or intervene. Now, let's talk about the multipliers for loss prevention. For loss prevention, although they can operate under probable cause, their multiplier for most locations is going to be something called shopkeepers' rights. Shopkeepers' rights is an agreement between the state and retail establishments that the shopkeepers have a certain level of authority to maintain their business and to maintain the products within their business. So as long as their security, their in-house security goes through certain training that's documented, and they operate under what's called the 5 elements. Sometimes there's 6 elements, but for the most part, there's 5 elements. As long as their in-house security operates within these 5 elements, they have every right to stop and detain someone for a reasonable amount of time for shoplifting. What are those 5 elements? Well, here you go. Number 1, the loss prevention officer has to observe the person coming into the area. So let's back it up to our original scenario. That loss prevention officer is not at the register. He is in plain view of the jewelry counter, the jewelry area, and he sees that person in the red sweatshirt go in to the jewelry store. Okay. The second element is that he has to see the person select the item. So let's just say he's not watching him crash through the top of the jewelry case, but the jewelry is actually on top of the counter. The loss prevention officer sees this person select the diamond ring in the box and pull it into his possession. The third element is that he has to see the person either conceal or tamper with the item. So let's say that there's a sensor on the box, right? That's going to go off, or there's some sort of tracking device or some sort of lock on it. He sees this person taking that off and then putting that into his pocket. The fourth element is that he has to see the person leave the area. So now he quietly walks off or he runs out of the jewelry area. And the fifth is that the person has to bypass all points of sale. This is where most people in loss prevention get themselves into trouble, because if you think about a Walmart, how many different areas of sale are there, right? You've got your check stands, you've got an area of sale that you can make in the electronics department. If there's clothing, you can check out in the clothing department. Hell, if you go outside, they might even have a check stand out in the garden center, right? So before you can make that stop, before you can make that detainment, before you can make that accusation of a person shoplifting, they have to bypass all points of sale. Generally, they have to go out the door and get to the sidewalk. This is most often that sixth element. They have to leave and get out. I think I have that right. That would be entrance, observe the entrance. The second was selection. The third was tamper or concealment. The fourth was exiting the area. The fifth is bypassing all points of sale. So absent any one of those elements, loss prevention, generally, it might be different in certain circumstances, but generally they can't make that stop and they can't make that detention. So guys, listen, if we're reviewing here, right? If we're reviewing here, you're thinking about when you make that stop, when you make that detention. Let's go back to the question from yesterday. I said that If a subject is leaving the interior of a shopping store, well, let's just say that Walmart again, is leaving the interior of that Walmart, an associate says, hey, that guy stole a diamond ring, put it in his backpack, that guy right there, and it's the guy in the red sweatshirt. I asked most of you, I said, what would you do if he exits the door and the person that's outside, the security guard that's outside, he heard this radio transmission? Now remember, he's outside in the parking lot. He hears that the guy coming out with the backpack in the red sweatshirt has stolen something and concealed it into his bag. And as that guy steps onto the sidewalk, the outside security guard grabs the guy, puts him on the ground, starts wrestling his backpack off. I said, if you were that interior officer, would you help? And a lot of people said yes. A lot of people said yes. Now, guys, remember that outside guard, he has no elements under loss prevention. He's not even working loss prevention. He's working as a security guard, right? He has no probable cause because he didn't see this person take anything, right? Okay. More than likely, his post orders, if he's working outside, are to only operate outside. He didn't see anything that happened inside. Do you understand? And so what really concerned me was that what people weren't understanding, and this is something that comes up a lot, is that if you are absent the elements as a loss prevention officer, if you are absent the probable cause as a security guard, and if you don't have the ability to do any of this based on your post orders, if you stop someone, right, and you detain someone and you take their property, you're actually in the commission of a robbery. Now, the definition of a robbery is the action of taking property unlawfully from someone, a person or place, by force or threat of force. And I see this all the time. Someone's shopping cart, security guard grabs a shopping cart, takes it from them. Someone has a bag of merchandise that they say that they've paid for, and this security guard doesn't believe that they've paid for it, and they take that from them. Guys, that is a robbery. Now, give me a second. Does it always rise to that level? No, because most of us, if we're being honest, right, most of us work in shitty environments. We work around shitty people who do shitty things, right? So most often when a security guard makes a mistake or a loss prevention officer makes a mistake, it never rises to the level of that person pushing it far enough to where something happens where the security guard or the loss prevention officer have charges brought against them. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing, if you were to stop that person, wrestle that person to the ground, remove their bag, absent all of the things that are necessary for you to be able to do that legally and by policy, that you're not committing a robbery. You are committing a robbery. Now, if you're working as an armed security guard and you're finding yourself in that situation, you potentially could be charged with committing armed robbery. Now, guys, listen, this is not something that is open for debate. Too often on this channel, when we're having these types of conversations, right, in the comment section, people on other YouTube channels who run security guard, content channels, they want to say, oh, this guy, he's being too cautious. This guy, he's just being too, he's too worried about this, too worried about that. Guys, I am telling you, this is not something that is my opinion. This is not something that's open for debate. This is legit how it is. And you do not want to be the test case. Okay. Now, is it something that you might be able to wiggle yourself out of? Sure. But personally, I don't want to spend $250 to $500 an hour to fight whether or not I was in the right. Okay. You're better off understanding these three levels. Okay. You're better off understanding these three levels of authority to detain, operating within them, and operating within your post orders, because it's so not necessary for you guys to find yourself in this situation. Guys, listen, your thoughts, your comments, your feelings about this. Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you think about it? Share it below. Be great.